So we want to talk about survey methodology. So a survey, if you do a survey design correctly, it provides a quantitative or some sort of numeric description of trends, attitudes, or opinions of a population by studying a sample of the population. And that's where the trick comes in, into studying a sample of the population. So we use survey research for answering a whole range of type questions. But for instance, to answer questions that have been raised, to solve problems that might have been posed, or to observe, to gauge attitudes, to assess needs, set goals, determine whether or not specific objectives are being met, establish baselines, and so on. So governments use surveys all the time to establish where there might be needs for specific things. So for instance, every 4 or 8 years, I think it's about every 8 years, government has a census. Now a census is like a survey, except it surveys the entire population. Now all other surveys can't do that. It's only a government that could decree that we have a census where everybody in the population has to answer a survey. Now these census data, a census is on the extreme end of a survey where you survey the entire population. The census data is used to determine healthcare needs, what areas of the country might need a new hospital or certain services and so on. Now we can do that thing to a lesser degree with a normal survey, but of course we don't survey the entire population. We survey a sample, and then we try and extrapolate that sample to the entire population. There are 3 distinguishing characteristics of survey research in general, and they are: survey research is used to quantitatively describe specific aspects of a given population. So you might want to find out what percentage of the population has diabetes, what percentage of the population might have a mental disorder, what percentage of the population has got certain income ratios, those sorts of things. And so you put a survey out, you survey a selection of the population, you get the data, and then you extrapolate the results you get to the entire population. So it often involves examining relationships among variables. So there might be different variables. You might be looking at seeing if certain dietary supplements might cause liver cancer. So you might survey people with liver cancer and then ask them, do they take any dietary supplements? So the data required for survey research are collected from people. Therefore, you have to realize anything we collect from people is subjective. Okay, the moment you put humans in the mix of anything, answers become subjective. Survey research uses a selected portion of the population. So when we say selected portion, what we mean is a sample of the population, and by sampling a portion of the population, we take those findings and we later try and generalize those or extrapolate those back to the population as a whole. Independent and dependent variables are used. They help define the scope of the study, but in essence, they can't be explicitly controlled by the researcher. Now, before you conduct a survey, what the researcher has to do is predicate a model that identifies the expected relationships among the variables. So for instance, we might say, okay, somebody that takes, now, I'm only just pulling stuff out the top of my head. This is certainly not research. Just as an example, a theoretical example, people that take vitamin C get liver cancer. Okay, so you might theorize or predicate a model that is looking for that relationships amongst vitamin C and liver cancer. And then what you have to do is then you have to conduct a survey to then either prove or disprove that model. Vitamin C certainly doesn't cause liver cancer. It's just an example. So if you take vitamin C, don't panic. I take it. Okay, so we then construct a survey to test the model against the observations of the phenomenon we're studying. So in contrast to survey research, now what you have to do is you have to distinguish between survey research and survey. The two are quite different. A survey is just a data collection tool. That's all it is. The survey itself is not the point of any research. Survey research utilizes a survey as a data collection tool, and its job is to help the researcher carry out the survey research. So it's a tool, just like any other tool. So the point of the research is not the survey. So the term, sometimes we use the term survey instrument, so instead of survey. So the survey and the survey instrument mean the same thing. Call it a survey instrument because it gets across the fact that it's a tool. And the survey research, that's the research itself. So the survey instrument supports the survey research. So surveys, we can also use surveys to assess needs, evaluate demands, and examine impact. So for instance, you might release a new movie onto the market. So then you survey people, survey a random sample of people to try and gauge the impact of the movie. Okay, a movie, a small example. Okay, so again, like every technique we've talked about, every methodology, there's always strengths to every methodology, and there's always weaknesses to every methodology. That's why we need different methodologies for different types of research problems. Okay, what are the strengths of survey research? Well, a survey is capable of getting information from a large sample of the population, which is a good thing. Okay, surveys are also well suited to gathering demographic data that will describe the composition of the sample. So when you send a survey out, unless you construct it correctly, you need to know the demographic of the population you're sending it out to. Okay, so surveys are inclusive in the types of number and variables that can be studied. They require minimal investment to develop, so they don't take a whole lot of investment. Usually, well, put it this way, they can be done cheaply, but a good survey will take a long time, and a good survey might take a number of professionals to construct it correctly. But it doesn't take much to develop and administer, particularly now if you use a survey instrument website. So there's a lot of websites where you can construct a survey, put it online, and WebMonkey was one of those. So WebMonkey's been around for a while, and it used to be free, but I think now it's become so popular they've put a cost on it. So if you want to put a survey up on WebMonkey, it takes a little bit of money to do it. I'm not sure what the cost is, but there are other websites out there to allow you to develop survey instruments. Okay, they can also elicit information about attitudes, so what people are thinking, and that sort of thing there, getting the attitudes of people, you can't get that by a simple observational methodology where you're observing people in action, or you're observing a portion of the population. Just by looking and observing, you can't get that. You really need to ask specific questions to see what people are thinking. Now, but just because you asked a question too, doesn't mean you'll get an honest answer. Be aware of that, it's subjective. So important to note that surveys only provide estimates of the true population. It's not an exact measurement. So as I said, look, if you want to find out something about Australians, you would conduct a survey. If you want to find out something about people living in Ecuador, Ecuadorians, you would conduct a survey over there. But look at the population size. Now, we haven't got a huge population in Australia. We've only got about 25 million. But we can't send a survey out to 25 million unless you're the government and you want to send out a census. So typically what you might do is survey 2,000 to 3,000 people. And then you survey 2,000 or 3,000 people, then you take those results and then you extrapolate those out or generalize them to the entire population. So it won't be, it's only an estimate. So when you're extrapolating a survey from 2,000 to 3,000 people out to 25 million, be aware of the dangers of that extrapolation or the dangers of that generalization. So it's only an estimate, not an exact measurement. The weaknesses, there are weaknesses, of course, with the survey research methodology. Generally, they're unsuitable when you want an understanding of historical context. So if you want to look at the historical context of a phenomena, then it's not suitable. The reason it's not suitable is because people have faulty memories, and people will approach an historic phenomenon from a particular point of view. So for instance, if you want to talk about the previous election results in Australia, if you approach it from the point of view of a Liberal supporter, you will get quite a different understanding of that historical context, as opposed to if you approach it from a Green or a Labor candidate's point of view. So biases occur when you in survey results. So biases occur, and you can get a bias from a number of sources, either from a lack of response from the intended participants, or in the nature and accuracy of the response. You can get bias creeping in there as well. Other sources of errors might include intentional misreporting and behaviour. So if you're doing a survey, let's say I send a survey out to students, let's say I send a survey out to all the mid students in VIT, asking them about their habits in cheating and plagiarism. Okay, I would expect to get a lot of misreporting because people don't want to admit in the survey, even if the survey was anonymous. And I said, I've got no idea who you are. People would be reluctant to report anything. So they wouldn't report misbehaviour. So it's the same way if I did a survey in Melbourne and asked for people's criminal activity behaviour, people would be reluctant to report it. So you would get bias. It would be a source of error because people would not report their own behaviour. Now, there have been other cases where other institutions, Monash or Melbourne or some of the other universities, have actually surveyed their students on plagiarism and reasons for it, and they do get honest answers. So, but you would have to you'd have to believe that there would be some bias in some of those answers. So a lot of people will answer falsely to hide their own inappropriate behaviour or what they perceive might be inappropriate behaviour. Sometimes respondents have difficulty assessing their own behaviour. There's a good portion of the population that there is a specific condition for it. They're unable to assess their own behaviour or have poor recall of circumstances surrounding their behaviour. And again, this might be another source of inaccuracy.
The Victorian Institute of Technology has other great videos covering many different topics. Please check them out, and thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe the video for more great content like this.